Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Colin Quinn tweets, just watched Netflix Norm Macdonald special, no audience, and it didn't matter. His timing and material made it unnecessary. Actually, some dummy yelling, "We love you, Norm," in the middle might not have enhanced it. Hashtag brilliant. And we've got a new comedy beef. Yes, and it's new players in our comedy beef. Today, it's Monique versus D.L. Hughley. This from USA Today. Monique calls out bias against black women in D.L. Hughley dispute. "You're the reason why I fight for my people." Monique alleged during a performance on May 28th that she was supposed to be the headline performer at the Comedy Explosion, but that Hughley refused to perform at the event if Monique remained the headliner. This is fun. On Saturday, Monique was in Detroit and brought it up again. She said, "Y'all don't understand the fight I had to go through to stand in front of y'all tonight." Monique alleged that Hughley refused to perform if she remained the headliner. That's what the bleeping contract says. Monique is to be the last bleeping person on the bleeping stage. She is the headliner. That's what I signed the contract for. I chose to stand up. Hughley took to Instagram on Sunday to refute Monique's claims. He wrote, "All you have to do is check the order of names on the ticket stub from last night, and you'll see who's confused. Against my better judgment over the objections of my team and 4 other occasions where I said no, I decided to take a chance and work with Monique." He went on to cite some other feuds Monique had with other prominent figures in the entertainment industry, including Oprah, Steve Harvey, and Netflix, the latter of which Monique sued in 2019 for race and gender discrimination. Hughley wrote, "At some point, it can't be everyone else, it's you. Lesson learned. I didn't have anything personal against Monique. People paid a lot of money to laugh, not hear about your contract." Monique responded with her own Instagram post. Oh, I love this so much. She called out the 59-year-old comedian for messing with people who have never messed with you and who once considered you a comrade in comedy. The fact that you point the people to the ticket stubs for the order of the names versus to your contract implies that you don't have a contract that shows you're the headliner like I do. Either show your contract or be quiet. But I thank you, DL, because you're the reason why I fight for my people like I do. Anytime you open for the Kings of Comedy and I was the headliner for the Queens of Comedy and you think you should close the show over me, is a prime example of the bias that black women have to deal with in this business." Hughley then responded, posting a photo of what appears to be a deal memo for his performance. That memo states that Hughley was the headline act for the Comedy Explosion and that he would close the event. He wrote, "After this, I don't want to hear no mo about this. If you have a problem, take it up with management, and by that, I mean yours." Monique countered Hughley's follow-up with a post of her own. This is so much fun. Posting documentation confirming her headliner slot, including a photo of what appears to be a signed performance agreement, which states that Monique was the headliner of the show and the closing talent of the show. If you notice, mine has signatures and DL's does not. What type of ironclad agreement doesn't have the signatures of the participants involved? That said, DL, we the people, will be waiting for your signed agreement. Oh, it's wonderful. Bo Burnham dropped another pseudo-special. The Laugh Button writes, a year ago, Bo Burnham released Inside on Netflix. It was one of those rare specials that got ingrained into the pop culture lexicon. Did you guys enjoy it? I'm probably getting a little gray in the hair. I didn't love it. I kind of bailed on it. I don't dislike it. It's just not for me, I guess. On Monday, Bo tweeted, "Stay tuned." That was followed by Bo Burnham detailing that he'd be dropping an Outtakes special on his YouTube channel an hour later. 1 hour later, that's what he did. The Laugh Button summarizes it's an hour-long special that features loads of new material, behind-the-scenes footage, alternative takes, cut monologues, and more. It gives fans an inside look at how Inside came together. However, he's completely candid throughout the creative process. He's narrating that after a month, he has nothing he is deemed usable. He's seen yelling in frustration, contemplating whether or not a special effect will work the way he intended it to. It's super raw throughout and provides a look at we can only imagine was a frustrating 14-month process in trying to assemble Inside. At the end of the special, you have a deeper appreciation for just how he managed to pull it all off. At one point, he announces he's scrapping the special entirely. His reason was because the thing I'm writing about isn't ending, so it's hard to end whatever this is. I feel like I'm waiting for some big idea that's going to tie it all together, make sense of it, and satisfy me, but I don't think that's going to happen. The special had a lot more parodies of internet and social media culture than what made the final cut. Throughout the special, you see various parody ads, content creation, and a hilarious spot-on send-up of what the Laugh Button assumes is the Joe Rogan experience. Speaking of Joe Rogan, from the New York Post, Joe Rogan blasted calls to ban guns in the wake of the school massacre. On his podcast, Joe said, "It's like, how do you stop that? No one knows how to stop that." What's the answer? Is the answer to take everyone's guns? Well, they're not going to give their guns up. Only criminals are going to have guns. It's not going to be a good situation. He added that he doesn't think it's smart to take all the guns away from people and give all the power to the government. We see how they are with an armed populace. They still have a tendency towards totalitarianism. And the more increased power and control you have over people, the easier it is for them to do what they do. And it's a natural inclination, whether you're a person in power, to try to hold more power and acquire more power. Vanity Fair, writing under the headline, "The difference between Dave Chappelle and Ricky Gervais. Both comedians have created a stir for telling transphobic jokes in their recent Netflix specials. One seems to be coming from a place of deeply felt personal resentment, while the other just seems desperate to stay relevant. For Chappelle, it's become personal. For Gervais, it seems to be merely business. Gervais' big problem, however, is that none of his jokes are funny. He has, in effect, become the physical manifestation of a dead baby joke, a la his fellow British comedian Jimmy Carr, dealing in humor that can only be considered shocking or edgy to anyone who hasn't yet finished middle school." Let me jump in there. If you've ever seen Jimmy Carr, I don't think that's a fair comparison, because Jimmy is like clearly leading you down the road of, okay, let's see how offensive we can get. Gervais, I think, is a step to the left of that. I don't know. I guess it's a fair-ish point, but I don't know. Vanity Fair writes, "The vast majority of it, basically anything that has to do with the trans community, is old hat. Gervais eschews socially relevant topics and current events to focus on ideas that were taboo in the late 90s. The coronavirus is brought up only as a thinly veiled segue to get into jokes about AIDS in Africa, the sort of which you can find in any rerun of South Park. Gervais spends no less than 20 minutes stumping away about the absurdity of religion, something he's been talking about for well over a decade now. His best joke, if you can call it that, pertains to the age-old concept of whether it's ethically responsible to go back in time and kill baby Hitler, an idea that's been played out since about 2003. They add, by the way, Gervais has been telling some version of that joke for at least 4 years now. Unlike Gervais, Chappelle appears to feel that he, like Gervais, a successful multimillionaire comedian, is the real victim in the ongoing culture wars between himself and his critics, a war that places trans people and black people in opposition to one another. Never mind, of course, that it's possible to be both at once. In the closer, Chappelle makes clear that he believes society values black men less than it values the queer community. Ultimately, the depressing thing about Chappelle is how talented he is, how he maintains the ability to craft a funny, relevant joke. When he turns the lens away from the queer community and onto himself, as he did in a riff about filing an order of protection against a racist intruder on his property, he's still intelligent, irreverent, groundbreaking, but with every special and surprise set, he seems to stray further away, driven not by comedic impulse but by vendetta. Feels like he's been radicalized. More stuff. This is a lot of the stuff that I mentioned on yesterday's podcast that I just bumped because it was nice out and I wanted to hang out by the pool. Jason Zinoman writes for the New York Times. He's fantastic. Follow him on Twitter. He wrote about the Katt Williams special. He liked it a lot. I actually hit him up on Twitter and asked him if he had sound issues with it. He said he did not. He watched it on a laptop. I watched it on a television using a Roku device, in case you're curious. He didn't totally push back that I was a crazy person. He wrote something nice along the lines of like, yeah, I can see what you're saying there. Anyway, what he wrote was, what makes Katt Williams great? It's not the jokes, it's the performance. His new special, World War III on Netflix, underlines the showmanship and drama that make him the finest arena stand-up of the moment. Wow, that's high praise. As I mentioned, I only made it about 3-4 minutes in. I like Katt Williams a lot, but the audio, at least my experience, I couldn't hear him, and it was just too much work to focus on what he was saying. Maybe I have my TV settings wrong. I don't know, but I watch TV every night and I don't have this issue. Whatever, I digress. Jason writes, what other superstar would open his first special on Netflix, a famously global platform, with 10 minutes of local material about Jacksonville, Florida, or say with such a conviction that there's no such thing as cancel culture, or find himself in so many beefs with amiable peers? He's called out Cedric the Entertainer and Tiffany Haddish, but his fiercest feud is with Kevin Hart. The substance of their conflict is hard to figure out, but in terms of style, Katt Williams always comes up with more flair. He wants to use a video any boxing promoter would appreciate to challenge Kevin Hart to a comedy battle for $5 million. Oh, I'd watch that, wouldn't you? Yes, can we do that, guys? In his new special, which is not one of his better ones, his take on Joe Biden is that he's old, and the world war of the title is a vague battle between truth and lies that never entirely coheres into a complete thought. He pokes fun at Anthony Fauci and makes some half-baked jokes about Adam and Eve being incestuous. Williams has said he stopped performing in clubs and instead develops jokes in front of thousands of people. You can tell. The tepidness of his material here seems almost like a challenge, as if he's saying, watch how I can make even these jokes work. The first 10 minutes of his new hour have maybe 2 good punchlines, and both are about chicken wings. The remarkable part is that they are completely unconnected, and most comics would have at least used a transition to tie them together and build momentum. But whereas there are many comics who can write a tight joke, there's only one Katt Williams. He tosses ideas out and then, through force of charisma and performance chops, makes them amusing in a way no one else could. So supposedly over the weekend, the Bob's Burgers movie was in theaters. Now, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. One, have you ever seen Bob's Burgers? No, you haven't. Have you ever met anyone who's seen Bob's Burgers? No, you haven't. Have you ever seen the Bob's Burgers movie? Nope, you didn't go see it. You went to see Top Gun Maverick. I know what you did. And have you met anyone who has seen this Bob's Burgers movie? No, you haven't. I mean, how much proof do I have to give you, guys? No one has seen this thing. It's a hoax. Speaking of animation, from the AV Club, John DiMaggio, voice of Bender on Futurama, he told the Phoenix Fan Fusion over the weekend he didn't get more money. John said, people are like, I'm so glad you got more money. I didn't get more money. What I did get was a lot of respect and a lot of head nods from people who were like, yo, bro, I see you and I thank you. He acknowledged the reaction from voice acting colleagues was quite rewarding, but said, trying to get money out of Disney is like trying to get blood from a stone. You ain't going to get it. In the end, his decision to concede came down to a discussion with his agent as to whether we want to be in the house having a nice Thanksgiving dinner or standing across the street in the freezing rain watching everybody eat stuffing. DiMaggio said, but listen, the best thing about that fight, I had Disney, Hulu, I was holding onto their collective testicles so hard that they couldn't, there was nowhere for them to go, but there was also nowhere for me to go, and who wants to hold on for that long? DiMaggio said the plan for Bender, had he not come back, was they were going to use guest stars, and they were going to replace Bender's voice each episode. So I've read that several times. I don't think that means that you'd get somebody else to voice Bender sounding the way Bender normally does. I think it would have been more like, hey, Bender, why do you sound like Ricky Gervais this week? And then just have Ricky Gervais read the lines, something like that. Who knows? Speaking of who knows, Kim Kardashian and Pete Davidson have arrived in London. Why? It's the Queen's Jubilee. Yeah, it's the Queen's Jubilee, big party in Britain. If you want to follow that, listen to Palace Intrigue. That's the royal family podcast I'm the writer for, and we are doing double-sized episodes and weekend episodes. It's like a whole thing. Like, that's like the Super Bowl of royal family, the Queen's Jubilee. Anyway, Kim and Pete are there. Why? I don't know either. They were seen walking around London holding hands, and then on a dinner date at the River Cafe. Harper's Bazaar says Kim Kardashian was all smiles. Pete Davidson did his best to avoid the cameras. All right. Let me do this Andy Dick thing. I've been bouncing this for days. So there's a new development here, and then I'll catch you up. Comedian Andy Dick will not be charged in connection with his arrest back in May on suspicion of felony sexual battery. Dick was taken into custody in Orange County, California on May 11th after being involved in an altercation at an RV campground. Now, the Daily Mail, this is a story I had announced before the weekend. They had done a recap of this. Let me just fly through this quickly. They wrote, trouble comedian Andy Dick has gone from making millions to being arrested for felony sexual battery at a $20 a night RV park where he lived with a group of live streamers. That arrest was shown on YouTube and footage posted to the channel Captain Content RV. A young man who goes by the name JJ can be seen telling another person in the RV that he believed Andy Dick had molested him in his sleep. Again, the Orange County Sheriff's Office has told The Hill on Monday that Andy Dick will not be charged. JJ is heard in the original live stream trying to confront Andy Dick about the alleged incident. Andy Dick is heard saying that he's on the phone with his baby's mama. He denies the allegation, then is heard asking, "Did you take my blow?" The man replies, "No, I didn't even take it whenever it was offered." JJ then asks Andy Dick, "Why did you assault me in my sleep?" Andy Dick, "I never assaulted you in your sleep. Can you leave me alone?" But there's more. The Daily Mail wrote that incident came a month after police were called to an apartment in Las Vegas where Dick had been staying with a Twitch streamer who goes by the name Wappy Flanker. Quoting the Daily Mail, the shocking video, which was attempting to raise money to help the beleaguered comedian, then shows a third man join the pair at Flanker's place, where an argument quickly breaks out. Flanker then pulls a gun and warns the man to leave, as Dick can be heard in the background saying, "Don't shoot the gun." TMZ reported that authorities were alerted to the situation after someone who was watching the live stream called for a welfare check. Commenters online began to speculate that Andy Dick was being held hostage at the apartment, although Andy Dick reportedly told police that he wanted to remain at home. Wow. The article then includes a long litany of other incidents. Andy Dick, I hope you're okay. I got an email from Nathan who wrote, "You mentioned you like Kyle Mooney, but couldn't remember why or for what character, so I thought you might appreciate my favorite clips." He shared with me, Kyle steals Pete Davidson's look, Brothers, and Another Brothers. I'll share those links in the episode description if you want to check those out. Nathan, was great to hear from you. Appreciate it. Also, into the weekend, I had posted on the Facebook group, Daily Comedy News podcast group, asking you guys for your Mount Rushmore of comedy. Mine was, and I might change my mind as the day goes on, but I went with Carlin Pryor, Bob Hope, Johnny Carson. Diane chimed in. Carlin, Rivers, Johnny Carson, Phyllis Diller. I know sounds weird, but my personal criteria was who has the most lines and jokes that I can recite by memory. Lane Spurkus wrote, Carson and Hope are two of the best joke deliverers in history. Most will put Carlin and Pryor on their comedy mounts, but here are four truly exceptional pioneers that expanded the form and perhaps don't get their deserved credit. Jonathan Winters, Andy Kaufman, Moms Mabley, and Steve Martin. I'm a big Kaufman fan. I don't know if I can put him on the mount. Again, we only get 4 spots. I should do a deep dive on Kaufman one of these weekends. This year, there's been so much news. I guess I got used to doing the podcast during the pandemic. I used to do a lot more blatant weekend filler, I do a whole episode about Adam Sandler movies, and I haven't needed to do that. And on my editorial calendar, I've got real stuff all the way through June. I also canceled a couple trips, so I don't have to write in advance the way I sometimes have to. But at some point, I'll do a deep dive on Andy Kaufman. Thank you, Lane, for that. By the way, it was Lane's birthday. He's one of the hardcore listeners of the show. Happy birthday, buddy. Jack O'Daniels wrote, Rodney, 4 images of him. That's fantastic. And from the AV Club, The Illustrated Owl, The Songs of Weird Al Yankovic, is an upcoming graphic novelization of more than 20 Al parodies. If that's not enough, Emo Phillips wrote the foreword. And that is your comedy news for today. Follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your shows. If you want to follow the Queen, it's her Jubilee, Her Majesty. Follow the Palace Intrigue podcast in those same places. All right, see you tomorrow.